It all started on a quiet afternoon like any other. But that moment, that one moment, would change everything. I remember it as if it happened just yesterday. My name is Lindsay, I'm 32 years old, and looking back now, I have no idea what I was thinking when I said it. I was sitting at the kitchen table, chatting with my sister Danny as we did most days. You know how it is, just catching up, venting a little bit, talking about life, the mundane things that everyone talks about. At least that's what I thought it was. But looking back, I see how wrong I was. That afternoon, I casually said something I never thought would actually come to light. I said it without thinking, as I often do when I get caught up in the moment. If I could do it all over again, I said, I wouldn't have dated Derek, my husband. Came out of nowhere. I didn't plan it. It was just a thought that slipped out. I said it so flippantly, so casually, that it felt like I was talking about something trivial. Maybe a bad haircut or a movie I regretted watching. But no, this was Derek. The man I promised to spend the rest of my life with. And it wasn't like Derek was even doing anything wrong at that moment. He was in the other room, probably scrolling through his phone as he always did when he needed to unwind after work. I wasn't angry with him. He wasn't doing anything wrong. But for some reason, I said it anyway. And just like that, everything shifted. The silence that followed was unlike anything I had ever felt. It wasn't just Danny's usual silence. She's heard my rants before, she's used to it. No, this silence felt different. It was heavy. It was thick, as if the air itself had shifted. It made me stop talking. And then I heard the sound of the door, the soft creak of it opening. I turned just enough to see Derek standing in the doorway. He didn't say a word. He didn't yell, didn't demand an explanation, didn't even look angry. His face was blank. For a second, it felt like time froze, and then, without saying a word, he turned and walked out. The sound of the front door closing behind him hit me like a ton of bricks. It was the last thing I expected. I wasn't prepared for that. I thought he'd argue. I thought he'd at least get mad, maybe confront me. But no. He just left. What do you do when the person you love walks out without a word, without giving you a chance to make it right? I didn't know. And in that moment, I felt like a stranger in my own life. I wasn't even sure why I said it. Maybe I wanted sympathy from Danny. Maybe I was just venting and didn't think it would matter. I didn't mean for Derek to overhear it, but the truth is, maybe I didn't care enough to keep my voice down. But I said it. And I couldn't take it back. Danny didn't know what to say. She just stared at me with wide eyes, her mouth slightly open. She couldn't believe I had said it either. But instead of admitting I messed up, I doubled down. I tried to laugh it off, brushing it aside. He'll be fine. He's just being dramatic. The words felt hollow as I said them. I was trying to convince myself as much as her. I didn't want to feel guilty. I didn't want to deal with the weight of what I had just done. Hours passed, and Derek didn't come back. I tried calling him once, but there was no answer. I texted him. Are you okay? Can we talk? Still nothing. Fine, I thought. If he wants to sulk, that's on him. I wasn't about to beg him to come back. But as the evening wore on, something shifted inside me. A strange mix of anger and panic bubbled up. How dare he leave without even talking to me? But then, where was he? Was he really upset, or was he trying to teach me a lesson? I didn't know what to think. I stayed up late, scrolling mindlessly through social media, pretending I wasn't waiting for him to come back. But he didn't. By the time I went to bed, I was still angry, but the guilt had started to creep in. I told myself he'd come back when he was ready, that I wouldn't lose sleep over something so insignificant. Spoiler alert, I did. The next morning, Derek's side of the bed was still empty. His toothbrush was still on the bathroom counter. His shoes were still by the door. But the house felt empty. I texted him again. Where are you? Can we talk? Nothing. Again. I wasn't sure if I was frustrated, worried, or just plain confused. Derek wasn't the type to ignore me for long. If there was a problem, we talked about it. But now there was nothing. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes your heart race because you know something's wrong but you don't know what. I called Derek's mom, hoping maybe she had heard from him. But no luck. She hadn't seen or heard from him either. That's when the real worry set in. I wasn't worried because I felt guilty about what I said. No, it wasn't about that. I was worried because I hated being ignored. I hated not knowing what was going on, not knowing what Derek was thinking. He wasn't the type of person to play games. He wasn't the kind to just disappear. But that's what he was doing. And I didn't know why. So I started thinking about the worst-case scenario. What if something had happened to him? What if he was hurt? What if he was in trouble? But no, that didn't make sense. Derek was the most predictable person I knew. The most stable. That's what made him so frustrating sometimes. He didn't take risks. He didn't do anything impulsive. So if he was gone, it had to be for a reason. Called his friends. No one had seen him. I tried calling again, but still no response. I felt desperate. My mind was spiraling. I didn't know what was happening. I drove around for a while, hoping to spot his car or bump into one of his friends who might have some clue about where he was. But nothing. No sign of him. It was like he had disappeared off the face of the earth. When I got home, nothing had changed. His shoes were still by the door. His toothbrush was still in the bathroom. But he wasn't there. The house felt empty in a way I had never felt before. I just stood there, staring at the door, hoping that any second now he would come back. The next day felt like it dragged on forever. Every time I walked into the house, I half expected to hear Derek's voice or see him sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. But there was nothing. Just silence. The same silence that had followed me around the house the night before. Kind that makes you wonder if the world is still spinning or if you've been left behind. It wasn't just the absence of Derek. It was the emptiness that came with it. Every space in our home felt too big, too empty without him. The smell of his cologne still lingered in the air, but there was no Derek to breathe it in. No Derek to joke with me about something silly or ask me about my day. It was like someone had taken the heart of our home and left me to stare at the walls. I tried to tell myself that it wasn't a big deal. That he'd come back when he was ready. That maybe he just needed time to cool off. But deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. Derek didn't run off. He wasn't the type of person who walked away from problems no matter how big or small. But something had shifted. Something in him had snapped, and I couldn't figure out why. I texted him again that morning. "Where are you? Can we talk?" Still nothing. Not a word. It was the silence that was getting to me the most. The more I tried to convince myself that I was fine, that he would come back and everything would be okay, the more the silence made me question everything. I couldn't handle not knowing. Not knowing where he was, not knowing what he was thinking. The not knowing was driving me insane. I called him again. Voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't want to beg him to pick up, to acknowledge me. I wasn't going to do that. But as the day wore on, I started to feel something that made my stomach turn, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Worry. I didn't want to admit it, but I was starting to get scared. Derek had always been the steady one, the reliable one. The one I could count on when things got hard. But now? Now I didn't know where he was or what he was doing. And I hated it. Called Danny. She answered quickly, sounding concerned. "Hey, have you heard from him yet?" she asked. "No," I said, frustration bubbling up in my chest. "Nothing. He's just gone." "You should try to apologize, Lindsay," she said carefully. "Maybe you should call him and just admit you were wrong." I felt the sting of her words. Apologize for what? I shot back, defensive. For saying how I feel? For telling the truth? She didn't answer right away. I could hear her thinking, processing what I said. Finally, she said, "Lindsay, I get it. But sometimes we say things we don't mean. Maybe you just need to let him know that you didn't mean it." I couldn't help but feel the sharp edge of guilt cutting through me. Danny was right, but I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to admit that I might have pushed Derek too far, that my careless words might have done something I couldn't undo. "I didn't say anything that wasn't true," I muttered, trying to justify myself. "It's not like I said I hated him or that I was leaving him. It was just venting, Danny. Isn't that what people do?" I knew I was justifying it to myself. I didn't want to feel guilty. I didn't want to admit that I had hurt him. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face that reality. But deep down, I knew I had. I had pushed him too far. And now he was gone. And there I was, left to sit with my own mistakes. As the day wore on, the anxiety inside me only grew. Derek hadn't come back. He hadn't responded to my texts or calls. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I didn't know if he was mad, hurt, or if he was just done with me. But I couldn't sit in this silence anymore. I needed to do something. So I did what anyone in my situation would do. I drove around aimlessly, not sure where I was going. I called Derek's friends. No one had heard from him. I checked with his mom again. Nothing. They hadn't seen him. The only clue I had was the hotel charge I had seen on the bank account. I didn't know why he went there, but the fact that I knew where he was didn't bring me comfort. It made everything worse. What kind of person runs away to a hotel, hides from their spouse, and doesn't even have the decency to explain why? What had I done to make him want to leave without a word? I drove to the hotel, hoping I could get some kind of answer. Maybe someone at the front desk would tell me if he was there, even if it was just a little information. But the receptionist only repeated the same polite lines. "Sorry, ma'am, I can't disclose any information about our guests." I felt my blood boil, but I held it in. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to show how desperate I was becoming. But deep down, I knew that I was just spinning in circles, trying to find a reason, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. I texted Derek again. "I know where you are. Can we just talk like adults?" The words felt desperate as I typed them. My fingers trembled, but I stopped myself before sending them. I wasn't going to beg. If he wanted to avoid me, then fine. He could stay in the hotel, and I wouldn't beg for him to come back. But still, the knot in my stomach didn't go away. It only tightened with every passing hour. The hours dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. By now, it was well into the evening, and Derek still hadn't come home. My phone sat on the kitchen counter, untouched, no messages from him. I didn't want to keep checking it, but I couldn't help myself. Every time I walked past it, I found myself glancing at the screen. There was nothing. Just the same empty silence. I tried to convince myself that it was fine. That he just needed time. That this was normal for him. He had always been the quiet one, the one who took his time to process things. But deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. I knew that something had shifted. Something had broken between us, and I wasn't sure what to do about it. I kept playing our last conversation over in my head, wondering if I had said something worse than I thought. Sure, I had vented. I had said that I wouldn't have dated him if I had the chance to do it all over again. But that wasn't the same as saying I didn't love him, right? It wasn't the same as saying I wanted to leave him. It was just a moment of frustration. A moment of weakness. People say things they don't mean all the time, don't they? But then, why did it feel like I had shattered everything? Why did it feel like I was losing him, piece by piece, every minute that passed without a word from him? I texted him again. "Where are you? I'm really worried. Please, let's talk." Still nothing. I was starting to panic. I didn't know where he was. I didn't know if he was okay, if he was safe. Was he still at the hotel? Did he leave there too? Was he driving around, avoiding me? Did he want to be left alone, or did he need me to chase after him? I sat on the couch, my head in my hands, trying to make sense of it all. I couldn't stop thinking about how calm he had been when he left. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't yelled at me. He hadn't called me names or insulted me. No, Derek had just walked away. And that made everything worse. Made me feel like he was done with me, done with our relationship, and didn't even feel the need to explain why. I tried calling his mom again just to see if maybe she had heard something. But she hadn't. Felt like everyone I reached out to was as lost as I was. By now it was getting late, and the house felt even more empty than it had earlier. The silence was suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. My thoughts raced, spinning out of control. What if this was the end? What if Derek had really reached his breaking point? What if this time I had pushed him too far? I wasn't sure what to do anymore. I couldn't sit here and wait for him to come back. I had already done that for hours. And I wasn't about to spend another night in this house alone, wondering where he was or if he was okay. I had to find him. I had to know what was going on. So I grabbed my keys and left the house. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't just sit there anymore. I needed answers, even if I didn't know how to ask for them. I drove around for what felt like forever. I went to all the usual places Derek might go to, the park where we had our first date, the small coffee shop we liked to visit, the grocery store where we'd run into each other on weekends. But there was no sign of him. I didn't know what I was expecting, but at least I thought I might run into someone who had seen him. Someone who could tell me he was okay. Nothing. I started to feel like I was chasing ghosts. Derek wasn't answering his phone. He wasn't at any of the places I checked, and no one seemed to know where he was. It was like he had disappeared. Finally, I drove back to the hotel. I knew he was there. I could feel it in my gut. Something told me he had been hiding out there, trying to escape from me. I didn't want to think that. I didn't want to believe that he would just run away like that. But everything pointed to it. When I walked into the lobby, I had no idea what I was hoping for. Maybe the receptionist would be a little more helpful this time. Maybe she would give me a clue as to where Derek was staying. But when I asked again, she gave me the same polite, robotic response. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't release any information about our guests." I wanted to scream at her, to demand she tell me where Derek was. But I didn't. I just stood there, feeling the weight of the moment. This was all my fault. This was all because of what I had said. And now I had no way of fixing it. I walked out of the hotel feeling more lost than ever. I had no answers. No direction. Just this overwhelming feeling of helplessness. Derek was out there somewhere, and I had no idea where he was or what he was doing. All I could do was wait, and that was the hardest part. I got in my car and drove aimlessly for a while. My mind was spinning with a million thoughts. What if he was really done with me? What if I had pushed him too far this time? What if he never came back? The silence from him was eating away at me. I pulled over at a nearby park and sat there for a while, just staring at the dark sky. I didn't know what to do. Finally, I sent him one more text. "I know I messed up. Please just let me know you're okay. I'm sorry." I didn't expect a reply. I knew that by now. But I had to try. I had to make sure he knew that I cared. That I was sorry. Even if it was too late. The following morning, I woke up to yet another empty house. There was no sign of Derek, no text, no call, nothing. It was like he had completely disappeared, leaving nothing but silence in his wake. His side of the bed remained untouched, his toothbrush still sitting in the bathroom, and his shoes by the door just like I had left them. I tried not to let it bother me, but it was becoming impossible to ignore. The house felt so much emptier without him. It wasn't just that he wasn't there physically, it was the absence of his presence, his energy. His calm, his steadiness, the way he would walk into a room and instantly ground everything. Now, all I had was this unbearable silence, and I couldn't stand it. The night before, I had spent hours thinking about what I had said, about what had led up to that moment. I had convinced myself that I wasn't wrong to vent, that I was just being honest with Danny. But as I lay there in the stillness of the morning, the doubt started creeping in. What if I really had pushed him too far? What if I had said something that couldn't be undone? I sent Derek another text. Can we talk? I'm really sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. Please just let me know you're okay. I stared at the message for a long time before I pressed send. I hated the feeling of begging, but I wasn't sure what else to do. It wasn't just about what I had said, it was about what had happened between us. The quiet distance that had crept in. The tension that had been building for months, maybe even years. I didn't want to admit it, but I knew that Derek had been unhappy for a while. I had just been too wrapped up in my own frustrations to see it. But it didn't matter. That moment I realized something. Derek wasn't the kind of person to run away over a single fight. No, this was deeper than that. Something had broken between us. Something I hadn't been able to see or understand until now. I decided to call his mother again. She had been worried too, but every time I spoke to her, it felt like we were both just grasping at straws. She had no idea where Derek was, and that terrified me. I needed answers. I needed to know that he was okay. I didn't want to wait anymore. I wasn't going to sit around, hoping for him to come back when I didn't even know where he was. So I made a decision. I was going to find him. I wasn't sure how or where, but I couldn't let him slip away without even knowing what had gone wrong. I grabbed my keys, and for the first time in days, I stepped out of the house and into my car, not knowing where I was going, but knowing that I had to do something. I drove through the city, past places that used to mean something to us. I stopped by the coffee shop where we would sit together on Sunday mornings, or the park where we had taken our first walk as a couple. But there was no sign of him. No sign of where he could be. I tried calling his friends again, but they were just as clueless as I was. They hadn't heard from him either. That only added to the growing sense of panic inside me. Was he hiding from me? Was he trying to punish me? Or was he truly done with me? Questions circled around in my head, getting louder with each passing moment. I couldn't breathe. And then, in a burst of desperation, I remembered the hotel. The one I had seen on the bank statement. I didn't know what I was going to do if I found him there. But part of me had to know. I had to see it for myself. I drove to the hotel, the same one I had tried to call earlier. When I got there, I felt like I was in a dream. The hotel was small, a little run down, but it wasn't like Derek to just disappear like this. He had never acted like this before. I walked into the lobby, my heart pounding, my mind racing with a million thoughts. I approached the front desk, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi, I'm looking for a guest," I said, keeping my tone as polite as possible. "His name is Derek." The receptionist, a young woman with no expression, looked at me for a moment before shaking her head. "Sorry, ma'am, I can't release any information about our guests." I felt my frustration building. I had to know. I needed to know if he was here. I needed to see him, to talk to him, to fix whatever had gone wrong. "I'm his wife," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "He's been gone for days, and I'm really worried about him. Please, I just need to know if he's here." The woman looked at me for a moment longer before repeating, "Sorry, ma'am. I can't give out that information." I felt helpless. Standing there in the lobby of the hotel, I had no idea what to do. My frustration was boiling over, but there was nothing I could do to get the information I needed. I turned and walked out of the hotel, feeling a wave of defeat wash over me. I had no answers. No clue where Derek was or what he was thinking. It was like I was chasing a ghost, trying to hold on to something that had already slipped away. I got back in my car, feeling like I was suffocating. The silence was deafening. I drove aimlessly for a while, not knowing where to go, not knowing what to do. I thought about stopping by Derek's mom's house again, or maybe calling his friends one last time. But deep down, I knew that the problem wasn't with them. It was with us. It was with me. I had pushed him too far. I had said something that hurt him deeply, and now he was gone. And the worst part was that I didn't even know how to fix it. I couldn't stand the feeling of not knowing where Derek was anymore. The uncertainty, the unanswered questions, gnawed at me in a way I hadn't experienced before. Every inch of my body felt on edge, like a pressure that only built with every minute that passed. I thought of all the moments in our relationship when things had been easier, simpler. Back then, I never had to question Derek's commitment, never had to wonder whether we'd get through tough times. He was always there, steady and calm. But now that calmness was gone. It was replaced by an absence that felt like a void. I found myself obsessively checking my phone, hoping for a message, for some sign of life from him. Anything. But nothing. And it wasn't just the silence from Derek that ate at me, it was the fact that no matter how many times I tried to convince myself it was just a fight, it was just a misunderstanding, I knew deep down that something deeper was going on. Something had changed between us, something that couldn't be undone with an apology or a simple conversation. The truth was, I wasn't sure I even knew who I was anymore in this marriage. I had spent so much time focusing on my own feelings and frustrations that I stopped paying attention to Derek's needs, his quiet signs that he was unhappy too. And yet, despite all of this, there was a small part of me that was too proud to admit I was wrong. I wasn't ready to apologize, not fully. Not until I could see him again, talk to him face to face, and figure out how to make this work. It felt like if I apologized first, I'd lose some control over the situation. But the longer he stayed away, the more I realized I had already lost control. The day felt like it dragged on forever, and the emptiness in the house just kept growing. I walked from room to room, staring at the place we had built together, but everything felt hollow now. I kept thinking about the things I had taken for granted, the small moments, the routine of us, even the quiet moments when we didn't need words to communicate. Now they felt like ghosts, memories I couldn't get back. By the time nightfall came, I knew I couldn't just keep sitting here, hoping he'd return. I couldn't do it anymore. The silence was too deafening. The not knowing was eating me alive. So I decided I would find him. It wasn't just about the hotel anymore. It was about making sure he was okay. Making sure I wasn't losing him forever. I left the house again, driving to places I thought he might be. There was nothing more pathetic than chasing after someone who wasn't there, but I didn't care. I needed answers. I needed closure. Or at the very least, I needed to know that Derek wasn't out there, alone, hurting, without any explanation. Felt desperate. I knew that. But I was past the point of caring. This wasn't about playing it cool anymore. This wasn't about whether or not I looked desperate. I had to fix this, or at least try to. I drove around for hours. The streets felt unfamiliar, like I was walking a path I'd never been down before. I stopped by places I knew Derek frequented. The little diner where he liked to grab coffee, the park we'd always walk through on weekends. But each time it felt like I was chasing shadows. There was no sign of him. No trace. And it only made me feel more and more lost. Finally, I decided to go back to the hotel. I wasn't sure why I kept returning there, but there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that he was there. I didn't know why he would choose to hide at a hotel, but part of me just had to know. When I arrived, I parked in the lot and sat in my car for a few minutes, staring at the building. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I couldn't just keep driving around forever. I had to face it. I had to face the possibility that Derek might never come back, and the reason he left might be something bigger than I was willing to admit. With a deep breath, I got out of the car and walked into the hotel lobby once again. The same receptionist was behind the desk, and I felt a brief flash of irritation at the sight of her. She looked up when I approached. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said immediately, anticipating my request. "I cannot provide information about our guests." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Please. He's my husband. I just need to know if he's here. I'm really worried about him." The receptionist gave me a sympathetic look but said nothing. I knew it wasn't her fault, but I couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness. I was so close and yet so far away from knowing the truth. I didn't know what to do next. I had no idea where else to look for him. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, threatening to spill over. I had no more fight in me. I had no more pride to hold on to. I just wanted him back. "Please," I said, my voice cracking. "Just tell me if he's here. I need to talk to him. He hasn't been home. I don't know what to do anymore." But the woman's response was the same. "Sorry, I can't help you." I turned around and walked out of the hotel, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my life. I had been so sure that I could fix this. So sure that if I just found him, I could apologize and everything would be okay. But the more I tried, the more I realized that I couldn't undo what had been done. I climbed back into my car, defeated, feeling the weight of everything settle in my chest. The truth was, I didn't know how to fix it anymore. I had pushed Derek too far, and now he was slipping away and I was powerless to stop it. I drove aimlessly for a while, not sure where I was going or what I was hoping to find. The city around me felt like it was closing in, like the walls were getting smaller with every turn I took. I kept thinking about everything that had led to this moment, the fight, the words I had said, the things I had ignored for too long. And it was like I couldn't breathe. It was as if the weight of everything that had happened was pressing down on me, suffocating me. I kept thinking back to the little things about Derek, the way he always made coffee just the way I liked it, the way he'd laugh at my bad jokes even when he didn't think they were funny, the way he'd always let me vent about my day, never judging me, always listening. He had always been there. He was steady, constant, everything I could rely on. And now I had pushed him away. I didn't want to admit it, but the truth was I had taken him for granted. I had been so focused on my own unhappiness, on the things I felt were missing, that I didn't see how much he had given me. I was so angry at him for leaving, so upset that he wasn't here to make this right, but as I drove through the streets, all of it started to sink in. The blame wasn't on him. It wasn't on Derek at all. It was on me. I had pushed him to this point. I had taken his patience and love for granted until it was too late. Now he was gone and I didn't even know how to fix it. When I returned home, the house felt more desolate than ever. Every room echoed with memories of him. His shoes by the door, his jacket hanging on the hook in the entryway, his favorite mug still sitting in the kitchen. It was as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Everything was falling apart. I sat in the kitchen, staring at his mug, running my fingers along the rim of it. He had always made tea in that mug. It was one of those small, comforting things that felt like part of a bigger routine, part of the life we had built together. But now it just felt like an empty object, a reminder of everything I had lost. I had been so caught up in my own frustrations and my own feelings that I never stopped to listen to Derek. He had always been quiet, always kept his emotions to himself. Maybe too much. Maybe that's where I failed him, by not noticing that he was pulling away, by not seeing the cracks in our marriage until it was too late. As the evening wore on, I knew I couldn't keep running from the truth anymore. Derek wasn't just mad at me. He wasn't just sulking in a hotel room. He was gone because something fundamental between us had broken, and no amount of apologies or promises could fix that. I had failed him, and I couldn't take that back. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just the words I had said. It was the years of neglect, of taking him for granted, of pushing him aside when he needed me. Maybe I had been too caught up in my own unhappiness, in my own insecurities, to see what was happening to our relationship. I had expected Derek to always be there, to always be the steady one who would balance out my chaos. But now I saw that I had relied on him too much, and I hadn't been there for him in the ways he needed me to be. I decided to call him again one last time. This time I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to plead for him to come home. I just needed to hear his voice. I needed to know that he was okay even if things were over between us. Even if we couldn't fix it. The phone rang. Felt like an eternity before the voicemail kicked in. I hung up, staring at the screen. I didn't leave a message. What more could I say? I had already said it all, hadn't I? I had told him I was sorry, that I didn't mean what I had said. But now it felt like the words didn't matter. What mattered was that I had pushed him away and I didn't know how to bring him back. I thought about the last few years of our relationship, about the times when things had been good between us, when we had laughed together, when we had dreamed about the future. I missed that. I missed him. And now it felt like those memories were fading away, like they didn't even belong to me anymore. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know how to fix this. But one thing was clear. Derek had made a choice, and that choice was to walk away from me. And I couldn't change that. I could keep texting him, calling him, begging him to come back, but it wouldn't make a difference. What was broken couldn't be fixed with words. The trust, the connection, the love we had once shared, it was all gone. I had to let go. I just didn't know if I was strong enough to do it. Days passed without any word from Derek. The silence between us grew heavier with each minute. It was like I was living in a different world now, one where I no longer had control over anything. The house felt even emptier without him. I moved around, trying to fill the space with activity, work, cleaning, errands, but it all felt hollow. Every task felt like I was just going through the motions, pretending that things weren't falling apart, pretending that everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. I would catch myself waiting for a text, for a call. But nothing ever came. The anxiety that had been gnawing at me for days was slowly consuming me. What had happened to us? Why had it all unraveled so quickly? I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my chest that something was missing, but it was there, constant, like a drumbeat reminding me that Derek was gone and this time he wasn't coming back. I started to think about the man he had become, the version of Derek I had taken for granted. The Derek who was steady, patient, and always so kind. I had relied on him, expected him to always be there for me without considering that he had needs too, that he had been hurting as much as I had. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I had pushed him too far. I had taken his love for granted, assuming he would always forgive me, always understand me, always be patient with my moods. But the truth was, he had his breaking point. And I had reached it. I realized as I walked through our empty home that it wasn't just Derek I had been failing. It was myself too. I had neglected my own feelings, my own needs, and in the process I had neglected him as well. I had built this version of him in my mind, one who would always forgive me, always be there. And when he wasn't, I didn't know how to handle it. I wasn't sure what I expected. Did I think that Derek would just come back, that everything would be okay once I apologized? That he would just sweep everything under the rug like it had never happened? Maybe I did, and maybe that's why I couldn't accept the reality that he was gone. Not just physically, but emotionally. He had checked out long before he left that night, and I had failed to see it. I finally gathered the courage to text him again, but this time it wasn't to beg for him to come back. It wasn't to try to fix everything. It was just to say goodbye, to accept that maybe it was over. I had to face the fact that I couldn't keep holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. The message was simple. I hope you're doing okay. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you find what you need. I'll always care about you, but I think it's time for both of us to move on. I stared at the text for a long time, my finger hovering over the send button. The weight of the words felt like an anchor. I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go, but I knew I had to. I couldn't keep waiting for something that wasn't going to happen. I hit send. Immediately, I felt the wave of regret and doubt flood over me. Did I really mean it? Was I just too afraid to admit that I had made a huge mistake? I wasn't sure. But in that moment, I knew I couldn't keep pretending that everything would magically fix itself. I had to face the consequences of my actions. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I tried to focus on work, on other distractions, but it was hard. My mind kept drifting back to Derek, to everything that had happened. Was he really gone for good? Was this the end? By the time night fell, I was sitting alone in the dark. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation we'd ever had, every moment where I might have been able to fix things but didn't. I thought about the future we had planned, the one we had talked about for years, and I couldn't help but wonder if that future was still possible. The next few days passed with no response from Derek. I checked my phone repeatedly, hoping for some sign that he had read my message, that he had thought about what I said. But there was nothing. No text. No call. No sign that he was even willing to have the conversation I had hoped for. I started to accept that maybe Derek wasn't coming back, at least not in the way I had hoped. He had made it clear that he needed space. And the longer he stayed away, the more I realized that I couldn't keep waiting around for him. I had to take responsibility for the choices I had made, for the mistakes I had made. I had to stop blaming him for leaving because I was the one who had pushed him out. I started to focus on myself, something I hadn't done in a long time. I worked on figuring out where I had gone wrong, why I had made the choices I had. I spent time with friends, started getting back into hobbies I had abandoned, and began working on rebuilding my own sense of who I was apart from Derek. It wasn't easy and it didn't fix everything. But it was a start. And then, one afternoon, I saw Derek again. I hadn't expected to see him again so soon. It had been a few weeks since Derek and I had last spoken. I had tried to keep myself busy, moving forward in my own way. But no matter how much I tried to distract myself, there was always that quiet, nagging feeling that I had lost something, someone, that I couldn't get back. It was a Sunday afternoon when I saw him. I was at a local coffee shop, my favorite spot for getting away from everything and just clearing my mind. I had just sat down with my coffee when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. Derek. He was sitting at a table with a woman I didn't recognize. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. I watched as they laughed together, a soft, easy connection between them. Derek's face was relaxed, more at peace than I had seen in months, maybe even longer. He was smiling. Really smiling, like he hadn't in a long time. And that hit me harder than I expected. I stood there for a moment, frozen in place, watching them. He looked good, better than I had seen him in ages. He had his old spark back, the one I had taken for granted. His posture was more confident and he seemed happy. I wanted to march over to that table to demand that he talk to me, that he explain what was happening. I wanted to remind him of everything we had shared, to tell him how much I missed him. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, watching him from a distance, feeling the weight of everything I had lost. It was clear that Derek had moved on, or at least he was trying to. He wasn't angry with me. He wasn't holding a grudge. He just wasn't mine anymore. And that truth, more than anything, cut deeper than anything I had ever felt before. They spoke quietly, exchanging glances and gentle laughs, their connection obvious. For a moment, I was struck by how easy it all seemed for him. How natural he seemed with her. And that was the hardest part, the realization that the man I had loved, the man I had relied on, had found someone else. Someone who made him smile, who made him feel at ease, someone who didn't carry the weight of our past between them. It was a painful realization, and it stung more than I wanted to admit. I stood there, my heart aching, but I didn't go to him. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. I had said my piece, I had apologized, but the truth was, Derek didn't need me anymore. He had found a new path, and I had to accept that. Eventually, Derek glanced up, and his eyes met mine. For a split second, I saw something flicker in his gaze, a flash of recognition, maybe even something like regret. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. He gave me a small, polite nod, a gesture that was almost casual before returning to his conversation with the woman. There was no anger, no bitterness in his eyes, just a quiet acknowledgement of the past and a recognition that it had already slipped away. I stood there for a moment longer, feeling the weight of my choices sink in. I had made mistakes. Big ones. And I knew in that instant that I couldn't undo them. Derek wasn't the one who had failed me. I had failed him. I had taken him for granted, pushed him away, and now he was moving on without me. I had no one to blame but myself. As I turned to leave, I felt a strange sense of finality wash over me. This chapter was closed. It wasn't the ending I had wanted, but it was the one I had earned. I had lost Derek, and I had to accept that. There was no magic fix, no second chance. We had shared something beautiful, but that was in the past now, and it was time for both of us to move on. I walked out of the coffee shop, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What had I really learned from all this? Was there any way to fix what I had broken? The answers weren't clear, but one thing was. I couldn't keep holding on to something that was already gone. I had to learn to let go, to forgive myself, and to find my own way forward. As I stepped out into the sunlight, the weight of the past felt a little lighter. Maybe this was the start of something new for me, something I had been avoiding for far too long. Maybe it was time for me to focus on myself, to rebuild what I had lost, not just in Derek but in me. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the smallest flicker of hope.